Okay, Christy, thank you. Thank you so much. I see that we have a veritable feast of socio-political history this week at the university. And so, firstly, a very warm welcome to Leon and to Barney for agreeing to be part of the event. I there are two quotes that sit with me from the book. The one says, "How do you live the present without understanding the past?" And then another one, "Apartheid was a way of life." And so, as I was reading the book, and fortunately, I've been reading it at night, but I can't remember my dreams, when I wake up in the morning. So I'm very, very glad about that. But I'm going to do just firstly the formal thing and then make a couple of comments. Leon Wessels has been an advocate of the High Court of South Africa since 1973. He's enjoyed a political career of 22 and a half years. um, he participated in the CODESA Kempton Park negotiations from 1991 to 1994. He served as the deputy chairperson of the Constitutional Assembly from 1994 to 1996. And then thereafter, he stepped down from Parliament and from politics at the inception of the final constitution, that is in December 1996. He also served as a commissioner to the SA Human Rights Commission between January 1999 and the end of September 2009. He is currently a member of the Constitution Hill Trust and the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution, that is CASAC, and he's as a legal advisor for Tusang Mawalo, a paralegal advice office in the Kagiso area. So, with the formal piece aside, um, Leon, I must say that it was a riveting read, and I found it quite quite interesting that how you explain how you were racialized. And I think it's Larry Bloom who writes about how we are racialized, and he speaks about the USA, South Africa, and Brazil. And of course, it's something that all of us have to grapple with. But I want to thank you for being so brutally honest. I mean, this is a first-hand account. We have, oral history, and really a first-hand account of how you were racialized as an Afrikaner in this country. I also I was also quite intrigued that you indicated quite early that there wasn't a Damascus moment almost, and that rather as some people explain, in fact, there's the author Linda Darling Hammond, and she speaks about the mentoring mosaic, where you have events, experiences, sort of historical moments that that sort of catapult you into a new way of thinking and of being. And there you come up with die zwerfjare van Poppy Longema. And I was saying, my goodness, here's a book that has this this huge impact on you. And of course, many of us in the 80s, we had been reading this book that had been translated into a dozen languages, and here this becomes part of this mentoring mosaic in your understanding as you grapple with the issues in the country. And I want to get to Barney now before I come back to one or two other other comments. And as I say formally again, I'm reading Dr. Nyameko Barney Pityana, born in Uitenhage, 7th of August 1945. He's one of the founding members of the South African Students' Organization, an important figure in the Black consciousness movement and exponent of Black theology, and an emeritus prof of law and a former principal and vice chancellor of UNISA. Now, Dr. Pityana went into exile in England, where he enrolled for further studies, having already received a law degree from UNISA. He returns to South Africa in the early 1990s and was elected chairperson of the South African Human Rights Commission on the 2nd of October 1995. In 2002, he was appointed as a fellow of King's College London, and in the same year, he was given an honorable mention in the UNESCO prize, the prize for the human rights education. Now, Barney, you commented just as we were coming into the program, that the last time that we saw each other was on the occasion of the George Botha lecture at the South End Museum, and of course that evoked immediate memories of Sanlam building. And I remember just recently, in fact, yes, on the 12th of this month, the university hosted the 10th Biko lecture, and in fact, both you and Peter Jones were very much in our thoughts, because we can't imagine what you must have gone through at that time, being in jail, in detention, and hearing of the death of Biko. So I just thought I must just, as you were speaking this morning, I just struck me again how our lives, of course, are intertwined, but yet we had these parallel lives, as Leon explains in the book. And I was thinking of how this was possible. And of course, all the time thinking about how do we undo, because this racial spatial planning, it was beautifully ugly. If trying to explain this, how effective this was in terms of the separation of peoples in so many different ways. And the legacy, of course, that we are living with today, that Leon, explains so well in the book. He comments towards the end of the book that apartheid was turned on its head when the National Party conceded that South Africa was one undivided country. And I think that's the rub. I mean, just 26 years later, the question is this: we still seem to be so divided as the national question remains unresolved. And so as we go into this debate, this discussion, this dialogue, I can't think of two better people coming together to actually help us to understand looking at this country from these different sides. I almost wished I was a fly on the wall when the two of you used to have your morning coffees at the Human Rights Commission, because I can just imagine, you know, in the late 90s, as you were discussing the rebuilding of this country, you know, what must have happened. But I think I've taken up enough time, Christy. So I'm going to pass back to you, and just thank you and the team for bringing this great set of of luminaries in this country to our platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Alan. Thanks for that. So without much ado, I'm just going to quickly share with you the format that we'll be following, just to tell you who I am for those people who've arrived late. My name is Christy van der Westhuizen. I'm an associate professor with the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy. We are co-hosting this event with Naledi Publishers, who published Leon's book, which is the springboard for this conversation this morning. Thanks for joining us. So the format will be, Barney will be engaging with Leon in conversation for the next 50 minutes. And then we'll have a Q&A of about 20 minutes plus minus. And this will be the opportunity for you to pose questions, but we're going to do that via the chat function on Zoom. So I'm hoping people are familiar with that. If you move your cursor to across your screen, you'll see at the bottom there's something that says chat roundabout in the middle. And if you click on that, you can actually type in there and you can pose your questions in that way to our speakers this morning. And we will also have, this is being live streamed simultaneously on Facebook. So we'll be also be feeding in questions from the live stream on Facebook. So let me immediately hand over to Barney, and looking forward to a riveting conversation.
Christy, Alan, thank you very much. Good morning, Leon. Thank you very much for having this conversation on Leon Wessels' a new book or memoir, which has been around. It came through the lockdown, came out through the lockdown. So this is the first time that it gets to see or to be seen by South Africans out of lockdown, or almost there. We are level 1 now. Leon, can you start us off by just simply sharing with the audience the book? What lies behind the book? What do you try to do in the book? Over to you, Leon. Please unmute.
Leon, just
yes,
unmute.
I've got it. Thank you so much. Yeah, technology was a little bit smart for me. It muted itself. Thank you so much. It's a wonderful opportunity. I want to thank Conrad for being so kind to hosting us. Thank you, Alan Zinn, for the introduction. And I would also like to thank the whole Conrad team, but I will not. I have to thank Naledi for publishing this book, and in particular, Johan Kutsia, and the nights that Gert Klaassen and I spent talking, chatting, arguing, editing. It was a joy for me. The book was sparked by 2 or 3 events. I hold the University of the Free State, in particular, the Archive for Contemporary Affairs, close to my heart. It was in that room I was introduced to Professor Saul Dubow, who is the professor for Commonwealth Histories from Cambridge. And he was so excited when he met me. He said, "Let me show you the cover of my book. I have just written a book to be published within a couple of weeks. The title of the book is Apartheid 1948 to 1994. And He opened his laptop and there I was on the front page on the cover of the book. And I was taken aback, I was surprised because I said to myself, now here I am, 50 years after David Goldblatt took a picture of me riding a white horse behind Dr. Hendrik French Verwoerd. And there and then I realized I am still the face of apartheid. Dubois had kind words to say about me, but I thought I have to give you my account of this. Where was I? How did this come about? In spite of the fact that I'm still seen as the face of apartheid. As I'm grappling with all of this, I meet a group of students who embrace the concept of fees must fall, and I'm asked to say a few words at an event, and somebody stands up and said, you know, we are sick and tired of listening to old white men and the battles they had to fight. And I grappled with the issue as Ellen indicated. So how do you live the future? Dragging your past into the future. So this was a story of how I lived through all the battles that were fought that this generation do not want to hear about. Now, the fact of life is dear Barney, that this is the last stand of the baby boomers. The millennials are now in the majority. We have to be slow to educate, but keen to listen and to learn. So I thought I'd write this book, tell my story, and reach out towards the future. Try and generate some discussion, some debate, and some understanding. This really is at the heart of the book. So it is a journey from Krugersdorp to Constitution Hill. Krugersdorp is steeped in Afrikaner history. And I grew up here, I went to school here, and we lived with Paul Kruger, so to speak, when he said, as sure as the sun will rise tomorrow, Africa will be free. In that context, of course, he was thinking of Afrikaners and the battles they fought against the British Empire. Years later, Bram Fischer quoted Paul Kruger saying, as sure as the sun will rise tomorrow, Africa will be free, but in a totally different context. So this is our journey. We have a constitution, but it's an unfinished piece, and there still has to be work to be done. And I think if you do not use the past as a launching pad into the future, you will stumble.
Leon, thank you very much for that outline of the book. I've read the book, and I've had the privilege of being indeed the honor of being invited to do the preface to the book. I read the book in manuscript. I enjoyed reading it. I think Ellen is right. It's a fascinating, racy, honest read. And it does come across like it is indeed a very, very honest encounter with oneself, or to put it differently, with one's different selves, because I guess the Leon Wessels brought up at the home of a police father, living in Krugersdorp or some Dorpies and even Durban at some point. And the Leon Wessels, who went to university as an apolitical, so it seemed. Leon Wessels, who was interested in the matters of the world and to travel the world and to be free, but indeed the Leon Wessels who qualified and was launching himself into a career, into a legal career, but was sooner rather than later persuaded to get into politics naively. And the hurly-burly of and the odyssey of the National Party politics of his time, indeed to the Leon Wessels, who was a lieutenant of F.W. de Klerk, almost, who later was in the Constitutional Assembly, or indeed to the Leon Wessels today. So those have been different faces, if you like, of Leon Wessels. Now, my first question to you, Leon, is about the title of the book. You call the book Apartheid's Ghosts. I think I had hoped you would explain a little bit about that, but let me tell you, as I understand it, a ghost is the spirit of a dead person that is still hovering and controlling and frightening and dictating things long after it had gone. And you talk about the apartheid's ghost as if when one reads into the idea of a ghost, one kind of thinks that this is not real. This is not something to be afraid of. But people are still afraid of. Those who are living are afraid of the ghosts. Or was it apartheid's ghost, or was it apartheid as a witch or wizard? So evil spirits. Wasn't apartheid an evil spirit that still hovers around the fate of this country today as a destructive force, a destructive spirit that we as South Africans are having to confront today? Which is it?
Well, Barney, it's all of that. If you remember what Ellen had just told us, Ellen had just spoken about the spatial South Africa we are living in today. The spatial divides that we are experiencing is a ghost of the past. Now, the one in old circles, people would say, if you walk where you suspect you'll find a ghost, you just have to whistle and the ghost will shy away. But the ghosts keep on hovering. We are still living in a spatially divided South Africa. That is one of the ghosts of the past. And I say this with a lot of respect to you, Barney, and I'm pretty humble when I say this. But when I sit with you and I talk with you, I cannot escape the hard reality. Your preface is so kind. There in my mind's eye, you are held in detention, and an Afrikaner young boy is so sad when he has to tell you that Biko has died. Just the other day, we celebrated Biko's life. We are still talking about Steve Biko and what it would have meant, what it means today, what he tried to teach us. So therefore, I'm encountering the ghost. It's not as if I am going to reveal a lot of new ghosts. I find these ghosts all around me. Let me stay close to my roots. Krugersdorp is my roots. Whenever I go to town, I drive past the Paardekraal Monument. I see the statue of Paul Kruger. And I'm so alive to the fact that we are surrounded by the beautiful Magaliesberg. Now people always never told me where this name Magaliesberg comes from. They were all, later on they would say, "Ah, man, that was where our Chief Mogale lived. He lived in Mogale." But they never taught me at school that this Chief Mogale was an elephant hunter of note. So whenever I look at the Magaliesberg and I look at the Paardekraal Monument, and I think of Krugersdorp, Krierse Dorp, and as it is known today, Mogale City, I am confronted by the past. Now we argue about statues, for example. There is a statue of Chief Mogale, but given the size of it, it's disproportionate. And who entitles me to diminish the role played by Chief Mogale? So I am confronted. I am encountering apartheid's ghost and colonialism all the time. It is right here on my doorstep. I'm not whistling. I'm not afraid of it. I'm confronting it. I'm dealing with it. I cannot control the past. I just have to understand the past. I can control, and I am in charge of my attitude now.
Jan, thank you very much for that. But here's the truth. That actually 26 years after, 26 years into the new constitutional democracy, let me put it like that, the people of South Africa continue to live and to be confronted by the devils of apartheid. In a sense, it's not just the spatial geography, but the spatial geography has a meaning behind it. It is inequality, it is poverty, it is the way in which society functions and continues to organize itself. It is a crime. It is, if you like, the murder of white farmers by whoever. So this society that apartheid sought to entrench difference, right? And with it privilege to the few. Now these days, 26 years on, we still live with difference. We still have been unable to bridge the differences between the racial groups. The Constitution enjoins us to become a non-racial society. It says that we are one sovereign democratic state founded on the value, among others, of non-racialism and non-sexism. But are we a non-racial society? What are the barriers to us becoming a non-racial society? Isn't that the reality of the ghost? It's not. See, when you talk about ghosts, we talk about something that is not real. But there is a reality that we have to face today. Apartheid is tangible, material, real for many of us.
I don't want to dwell too much on the ghosts because I'm not whistling to them. I'm confronting them. They are still a reality. They are still here. But I think there's a new dimension which maybe will not give everybody joy, but it gives me a lot of joy, because the reason why it gives me joy is because I have developed this understanding over the years, and thanks to the Human Rights Commission, this has helped me to develop this understanding. let me deal with two issues, two experiences that you and I will know of, and that we did discuss around early morning coffees. First of all, the Human Rights Commission did an inquiry which wasn't popular. It was about racism in the media. And there were huge battles fought, serious battles fought. And you then, I can't recall whether it was publicly or privately, but it certainly is a statement worth repeating in public, said we have to fight this thing of racism in the media now, because one day we will be called upon to fight for media freedom. And in that battle, racism should not be the obstacle. Let's fight the race battle now. Now, obviously, we didn't conclude that debate if you look at what is happening through advertisements and stuff like that here and now. But the second question was this, and I find so much joy and comfort in a statement made recently by Tembeka Nokaitobi in his tribute to George Bezos, when he said that Bezos in his ways were not a lawyer that embraced positivism and was not legalistic in his approach. In other words, he interpreted the law and the Constitution to serve a greater good. But nowadays, we have to interpret the Constitution and the laws to serve another good, and that is the inequality. And of course, inequality, we are not the equal and the kind society we had hoped to be, but that is a battle which was grounded in the ghosts that we have to deal with right now. Education, inequality, and a range of other matters.
Thank you, Leon. I've got two other points to raise before we open up. The first one, I think Alan said something like this earlier. One of the things that I miss in the book is something in the order of something like a diary. I'd like to have heard some of those debates and discussions in cabinet or in the Security Council, whatever these things were called. So those inner, what was in the inner mind of the government as it was putting out these laws and policies. Usually politicians, when they retire, certainly British politicians, they produce these diaries. Did you take a diary when you were in government?
No, I certainly did not. But let me rush in to make the following comment. The people you are talking of, the National Party government under P.W. Botha, where I served as a member of the executive, and F.W. de Klerk's government, were a divided group of people. When F.W. de Klerk resigned, that group broke up into 8 different political parties. Can you imagine that cabinet being so divided that they ended up in 8 different parties? So the one thing I didn't want to do, I didn't want anybody to argue with me about what I was thinking. So what you have just read was my thinking. You will have to read de Klerk and Meyer and Malan and all those guys, what they were thinking. So in that sense, it's not a diary and it's not a book, a history book of that era. Now, history, I believe, is an ongoing discussion. So maybe you've just sparked a new book. How did I hear them? What were they saying to me? How did I interpret them? But first of all, I had to tell you, Barney, and the readers what I was thinking. And as you read the book, you will know there were moments when I stood alone. And I'm quite happy to say that those were the moments when I was at my happiest.
Okay, thank you. Now, for the sake of the readers who've seen you breaking out of the confines of family, going into alone into London, you said to your dad you didn't want to continue to live in this protective environment. You wanted to break free. But in fact, seemingly from that, you moved deeper and deeper into into the confines of a very close and very restricting social and political thinking that went right into the heart of the National Party. What was that difference between the young Leon, who told his dad that I want to be free, I want to demonstrate that I can look after myself, face the world, and then come back, and then gradually find yourself into the inner sanctum of the party that was very restrictive in terms of your thinking. How did that happen?
Thank you, Barney. I think the power of Afrikanerdom was so strong that it was difficult, if not impossible, to contribute anything outside the confines of apartheid. I mean, that's just very superficial what I've told you, but right at the heart of it was that I was afraid. I was afraid of being excommunicated. I didn't want to be an outcast. So I whispered quietly. I did my own research quietly. I whispered here, I spoke there, but the fear of being an outcast was pretty strong. And I would like to pay tribute and honor to one of your old compatriots. When I had the privilege as a student leader of meeting Onkopotso Tiro, it was an earth-shattering experience to me. Tiro was one of your colleagues, and he was the student leader at the University of the North of Oud Turfloop, and I think we got on well with each other. At the very least, we respected one another. But he made the point that we must sit around a table and find a solution that was lasting. And then he was brutally killed by the apartheid state. He was killed before I entered politics. So his life, in many respects, stimulated my thinking, and I was found in the I was caught up in this particular environment, afraid to be an outcast, but pushing for change and being argumentative within the confines of Afrikanerdom and the National Party.
Thank you. Christy, this is my last question, just for you to prepare yourself. Now, if we move away now into the present, into the future, in my preface, I make the point that so-called Afrikaner consciousness, Afrikaner nationalism, whatever you call it, in the new constitutional state is in trouble, because there are some who think, I'm thinking now about AfriForum, there are some who think that Afrikaner consciousness is something to be preserved and to fight for in the context of the whole. And therefore drawing narrowly, as narrow and narrow into a narrow identity politics, and making them as narrow as possible because of the fear that you referred to. But there are others, and I suggest in the book that you may represent them. There are others who are saying, you don't have to be less of an Afrikaner in order to become part of the whole, as honestly and fruitfully as possible. In other words, you don't need to move into a lacha, as a way of protecting yourself. Why? Because you are protected by the Constitution. And there's nothing more that you need than actually that the Constitution that is there, in fact, protects your humanity, your human dignity, your rights, your freedom, etc., etc. Now, just take us into where you think today and the future Afrikaner thinking should be in terms of how the new constitution is taking us.
There are many ways to tackle this question you're posing right now. Let me say, the one answer I'm thinking about, if I was now the Minister of Finance, and we know the challenges he's facing, but so no, let me don't walk the whole distance with him. But if I'm the Minister of Finance and I have a particular vantage point and I'm looking at my citizens, the South Africans, the taxpayer, will I have the money to finance the privileged? And he will not have the money to finance the privileged. Therefore, the state cannot have pockets of privilege. If the Afrikaners want to organize themselves into a particular situation, that is their choice. But they will then have to do it of their own pocket. My excitement of being an Afrikaner here and now today is the fact that I am who I am, and I am regarded as an Afrikaner by people that matter to me. So it's my initiative. If it goes well with South Africa, it will go well with Afrikaners. Now, if you define yourself as a minority, that is exactly what you will be. You will be a minority. If you organize yourself around issues, for example, if you advance the argument of multilingualism, let's just dwell on multilingualism. If you advance multilingualism, the Afrikaans language will be a beneficiary. If you ensure that there is proper functional education and schools in this country, Afrikaner schools as such will benefit from that initiative. And that, I would suggest, is how the Minister of Finance will look at the taxpayers of this country. So I don't have this fear. I don't want to form an alternative society within the ranks of South Africa. I find joy in the reality that South Africa is a country where many people reside, and I'm not afraid of diversity because diversity stimulates and brings the best out of all of us. But we should not allow our diversity to pull us apart, and we can easily ensure that with respect by respecting each other.
Thank you so much to both Leon and Barney for that very, very riveting conversation. And I'm immediately going to engage with the questions that have been asked. And I also want to encourage people to please ask some more questions. We do have quite a bit of time left. We thought it would be important to allow you and to give you the space to really engage with our two speakers this morning. So we've got a few questions that pertain to the Constitution, and then we've got a few questions that are speaking really to those ghosts in Leon's title. And I must say, a very evocative title. We also wanted to reflect a little bit on how these ghosts have also emerged in this current COVID-19 moment that we find ourselves, in the midst of a pandemic. So if our speakers could also reflect on that a little bit later. But firstly, we have a question from, well, it's a question, but I don't think Leon can really answer it. It's more a question about, a question for the ANC, I'd rather say, but maybe just, maybe a comment from our speakers if they want to. But Rian is basically just making a comment around talking about Krugersdorp, talking about experiences in Mansfield, and a woman who, her name is Catherine Guyana, who was living in Mansfield, and because she was anti-communist, she was apparently, according to Rian, targeted by the ANC at that time. This was in 1990. And the ANC also drove the PAC out of town and burned down a number of houses. And Rian is saying that this is a sign of the ANC's intolerance and so forth. So, I think that's more a comment than a question. Then from Karel Wandrach, basically is asking how would, asking both of Leon and Barney, how would you suggest that millennials and Gen Xers engage with the ghosts of our past in a constructive way? And then another ghost-related question from Professor Janet Cherry here at Nelson Mandela University. She said, I found the book very honest, but my question to Leon, who served as Deputy Minister of Law and Order at the time of the states of emergency, the CCB, etc., is how could you have had so much power and have known so little about what was happening? And then in the next round, we'll move over to the Constitution questions. But let me hand over at this point to Barney and Leon to answer those questions for us.
Can I deal with Mansfield, and I will also respond to the millennials, but please ask Barney to take the lead there, and I will gladly talk about the TRC. Let me deal with Mansfield, because Mansfield is part of me. I am part of Mansfield. I am in many ways defined by Mansfield. Mansfield is the township that opened my mind and opened my heart in many respects. And recently, very, very recently, just before lockdown, I had the honor and the privilege to do a walkabout in Mansfield in the company of a gentleman called Godfrey Mogorosi. Godfrey was an 18-year-old learner junior when Winnie Mandela visited Mansfield and said, together, hand in hand, we will liberate this country with our matchboxes and our necklaces. And I walked that particular road with Godfrey. I went to that church. I smelled, I felt, I inhaled the atmosphere at the time. And I don't know of the ANC on this. I would just venture to say that it is quite sad when one considers how bitter the battles were that we fought across all political divisions. All political divisions, they were hard. Blood was spilt. It is hard. It is tough. And I just wish that we could overcome some of those old divides and a wee bit more tolerant. And I think one way of doing this is not by denying anybody his or her past, but by listening to that. May I dive into the TRC question immediately? It remains a difficult question, and I deal with it in the book as such. An appearance before the TRC was no joke. Let me assure you, because you didn't know how many ghosts were hidden in the files right there and then. And the question was, how come I was in this power of authority and I knew so little? I think that was what I said in front of the TRC. We didn't want to know. That we didn't have a curious mindset. It's not a shallow answer. It is a matter we are still agonizing about. Right in front of me, I'm looking at Gang Galelwa's book of Abraham Tiro, Parcel of Death. To this day, and I did mention I wasn't in politics when that terrible bomb was sent that killed Tiro. To this day, we are still grappling with the issues. Who made the bomb? Who gave the instruction? Who carried the bomb? Because Tiro, as far as I know, was not a physical threat to anybody. So it's part of this brutal past. And it's my encountering with these ghosts. First, these ghosts, I played footsie with these ghosts. They were impractical. Don't take them serious. Then the brutality of these ghosts confronted me. And finally, I concluded that it is immoral. Finish and klaar. Barney, I'm giving way to you, but I will also respond to it if you prod me. About the millennials.
Yeah.
Do you want to come in? Thanks.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I think the thing we have to accept is that each generation, as Frans Fanon said, each generation must find for itself its own point of engagement. These are my words. But the important thing is that we need to be able to hear and listen to each other and enable others the freedom to dig deep and to examine and to engage. In fact, there can hardly ever be a generation that is right in every respect. So those of us who are from the generation of the, what did you say, Leon? With the generation of the baby boomers. those of the baby boomer post-war generation must recognize that we have really made a mess of the world. And we have failed where we could have done some things. Now, that's something that haunts me a great deal about South Africa right now. I have a feeling that we may have let go many opportunities to transform and to change South Africa since 1994 drastically for the better. And we must take responsibility for having failed, sometimes for good reasons, but we have failed nonetheless to transform this country and to make sure that it's a country of better opportunity for the largest number of people in our country right now. Those who are millennials are confronted with the present realities as well. So they too may have made a mistake and misunderstood, and sometimes need to learn, but at other times need to be better able to put pressures that are necessary on society and those who control societies, so that we can become a better country today. What I find, though, this is an ideological point I want to make, is that those of us who are, I'd like to think, from another generation, in the struggle, we were in the struggle less for the material benefits of it, because there was no likelihood, as far as one could see, of a material benefit at that time. And I've written about this. I bemoan the extent to which our country, our society, those who are in charge of our affairs, largely the younger people, have become extremely selfish, materialistic, anti-ideological, and in terms of the manner of thinking that influences your life and your outlook, your relationships with others. Sometimes they're not as strongly informed by a way of thinking as some of us were persuaded in our own ideas, whether it's Black consciousness, whatever it is. So I feel at times that today we need a good dose of idealism, this thing that actually takes you above of the rack and be able to think beyond the present, beyond the material, to be able to envision an idea of a society that is alternative and different, and commit ourselves to making a better society than the one that we found. I feel that if we were to be serious about that, about creating a society, not be confined by what we find at the moment, but we try to see how do we get out of it and try to be the ones who build a different society from here on. That's the idealism that I feel. Second thing that I think we need very deeply. In theological terms, we talk about a hermeneutic of suspicion. We need to be much more critical of the things that we see. Never read the obvious. Try to find what lies below that which is obvious to you. And a sense of criticality in the way in which we view and engage with one another means that there's nothing that is just going to satisfy you for what it is, but that you will dig deeper and deeper to try to understand what are its components that actually make it work and make it work better. So we need a society of functional critics, people who are actually able to tear apart and find the components of the system and build it up all over again. miss that. And I think we need it. So whatever generation it is, we are confronted with the same issues. That is that we need a set of ideas, and we need to be critical functionaries. I'll say the third thing, although I say the third thing only because as a preacher, I do have to often talk about three things. That's the Trinity. I say this third thing is just to, we're needing, it doesn't matter what generation you are. If you've got an ethical, a moral outlook to life, it really means that you take responsibility. You learn the art of taking responsibility. And I think in South Africa, it's fair to say, those three things that I've mentioned, doesn't matter whether you're from the baby boomers to the millennials, are in fact the fabric of what could make our society. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Barney. I hope I do not disappoint you when I make the following comment. But speaking to baby boomers in isolation of the millennials at times is extremely boring. If you want to deal with South Africa today and South Africa of the future, and there's not millennial in that particular discussion, it becomes an extremely boring discussion. So Barney, we have to extend that exclusive coffee club. We have to engage a younger generation there as well. Because if one considers the book written by Fiona Forde about the inconvenient youth, that's the way I remember the book. There are two outstanding features of the book. The one is that there was not proper mentorship. That's partly why it's an inconvenient youth. So being a mentor, that's my understanding of it, does not mean that you have to tell, but you have to be there to listen, to ensure that you understand. And if then asked, you could possibly give a particular advice. And if one remembers the book written by Clinton Chowkey, where he speaks of a particular generation born in chains. So we had these great battles, our generation, the South African boomers, the Pityanas, the Busaks, and a range of people like that. May I say, the Wessels, the Mayors and others, for freedom. That's fine, but we left that generation with serious challenges. And I find it so invigorating listening, talking, speaking to them. And not every young millennial I meet is a Skotani or a Tsatsansa. They are serious people who want to improve the quality of their life, and they provide us in me with a lot of joy, a lot of excitement.
Thank you so much, both to Leon and Barney. So some of our questions are sort of converging on particular themes, and the themes that are coming up are, on the one hand, unity. We know that our society has probably never been as polarized as it is at this particular point in time, well, ever since 1994 at least. And then the other point is around the issue of socioeconomic justice. So from Dr. Mampela Rampele, she says, Leon, knowing what you do now, how could you have done as a negotiator of our constitution to pave the way for freedom to go beyond politics, to include socioeconomic freedom, to exercise the ghosts of our ugly past? And then we have another question from Liz Carmichael, where she also makes a point around what structures exist today to help people to get together. She's reflecting on the National Peace Accord and the peace committees of 1991 to 1994. And she's asking what structures exist today to help people get together for socioeconomic development, as well as to get to know one another. And further then on the theme of unity, Dr. Gerard Korenhoff quoting the preamble of the Constitution and basically asking Leon a question. The preamble of the Constitution guides us as a nation into the future. In your view, what is our collective responsibility to live and practice the preamble of our Constitution in 2020? And he also wants to know, based on your reply, what's the title of your next book? So the pressure is on. And then he just quotes the preamble of the Constitution, and I think it is worth reading it. We, the people of South Africa, recognize the injustices of our past, honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land, respect those who have worked to build and develop our country, and believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it, united in our diversity. So that's, and then Thandi Mkizana asking, in 1994, Leon, and I think Barney also, where did you envisage South Africa would be in 2020? Is there anything that could have been done differently to ensure a more united South Africa? So if you could engage with that round, and yeah, let's hand it over to you now.
I won't duck the questions, but excuse me for saying I did see Sol de Beau's name there.
Yeah, well, that's on another theme. So, but let me.
Okay, but yeah, I just like to hear what.
We are actually also. I'm just thinking of our last round. So perhaps let me also add Professor Dubal's question here, even though it's not on those two themes, but it is a very interesting question. He's saying you issue a conversion moment, other perhaps than your embrace of human rights and inclusive humanism. But you say very little about religion as a child. Was the church important in your upbringing, Leon?
I mean, I have to answer, Sol. I wish I could see your face, Sol. I'm so excited to know. I presume you are sitting in Cambridge, I presume, following us here. And the Bow family, Sol and his father, and yeah, they are very close to my heart, and I thank you for inspiring this book. But you ask a pretty difficult question. Thanks for. I didn't want to be flippant, but I was on the cover of your book, and I am still thankful that you wrote those kind words about me. And the question of religion, maybe that could be another book one day. My religious upbringing is that just of an Afrikaner boy who grew up in the Dutch Reformed Church, and in that respect, you don't ask too many questions. You more or less say amen, and you pray, and that's it. And I would say my serious question about religion, which I don't write a lot about, I don't write about it, was there was a big problem in Manziville, and I had to speak with Desmond Tutu about that. I was an adult, I was a member of parliament, I was a backbencher, and I had to see Desmond Tutu. And let me just quickly say that Desmond Tutu and F.W. de Klerk both went to school in Krugersdorp, 2 Nobel laureates. And the reason why I went to see Desmond, I needed his help, because Winnie's chant, liberating this country with hand in hand with our matchboxes and our necklaces, sparked a response from the AWB, and they were arming themselves. And at that moment, we were on the verge of a race war. And as I entered Desmond's shall I say, chamber, his room, he always used to call me Obuti. And he said, Obuti, you are my member of parliament, but I never voted for you. And on this day, he said the following. He said, Obuti, I don't know why you came to see me, but let's pray. And that was the first time I prayed with somebody really outside of the confines of the Dutch Reformed Church. And subsequent to that, important theologians such as Freek Swanepoel, I think he's listening, who was the moderator of the Dutch Reformed Church and gave evidence before the TRC, and Willie Jonker, had a profound impact on my thinking, because right up to then, the national, how did they put it? The Dutch Reformed Church was the national party in prayer. And those people like Freek Swanepoel and people like Willie Jonker encouraged me to do battle with the Dutch Reformed Church as well, and not only with the National Party. But thank you so much, Sol, and thank you so much for being around. I've almost lost track of it all. Let me deal with Mampela Rampela. Mampela, I am so excited to have you around. Look, you have to remember two things. First of all, the Constitution was drafted under pressure cooker circumstances. And it's not, of course, my claim to fame on my own, but it was my claim to fame in the sense that I was part of the management group that ensured that the Constitution was agreed to within the stipulated time. We were a bit lackadaisical. We were supposed to finish at 12 o'clock on the 8th of May. We finished more or less 10 past 12. And that is inspiring for those people that don't hold on to deadlines. And I think the spirit of the Constitution was that socio-economic rights had to be dealt with as we moved along. And that is exactly what the Human Rights Commission tried to do. So I don't think that drafting of the Constitution was a missed opportunity. The missed opportunity, I think, is to be found in the TRC, because the TRC didn't deal with the socioeconomic divide to its full extent, and suggest and impose a so-called wealth tax. And I think many big businesses, companies were ready to pay that wealth tax. And that was an opportunity missed. And nowadays, I think people don't have confidence in a government to, first of all, charge people with a wealth tax, and then to distribute it for the betterment of those who are on the receiving end and the lower end of the socioeconomic scale. I dealt with that quickly. Liz, there is inspiration to be drawn from the peace accord, and I'm afraid I don't see anything formally in a government structure. We have to rely on socio-economic and civil society organizations, such as the Council of Churches, the different foundations, Tutu Foundation, Ahmed Kathrada Foundation, and organizations such as Kazakh that went about their business to confront the top six in the ANC as well as the government to try and promote unity, but I don't see anything comparable to the peace accord, and that I think is something worth considering by those in power. Gerard Koornhof, I still feel the excitement at the moment when the preamble was drafted, and I am involved in an organization, the Constitutional Trust, and we try to elevate through that organization the importance of the preamble and how we stand united and how we honor those that build us together, but united in our diversity. I'm moving swiftly and quickly. I think the question about being polarized, I think there are many people who want us to lock horns and many people who are stoking fires. That is undoubtedly so, but I am a firm believer that those who reach out and find strength in each other's company will overcome this polarized South Africa we are living in right now. I think I answered the question.
Can I just deal with, I think, one question that relates to how one feels looking back to 1994, where one is at today, and looking back to 1994. Christy, I think it was a question along those lines, right?
Yes.
I have to say that 1994, 1996 were very, very exciting moments to be a South African. It was the most wonderful time to be South African. It was a time when the TRC was in session, the Constitution was being written and was adopted by Parliament. As South Africans, we were so aware that we were creating something out of a dim and terrible past that all of us would find new life again. And for me at least, it was shaped by the Constitution and what the Constitution offered. And also with Nelson Mandela, I also understood that what the Constitution does, it gives us the freedom to work to realize those values and virtues that are reflected in the Constitution. The Constitution didn't give them in itself. It actually gave us the freedom to actually struggle further to realize them. So I was quite aware of that. I think as a country, we were generally on the right path. That is until a certain gentleman called Jacob Zuma was elected by his party, for which I think his party needs to take responsibility for that, 100%. I think that we were making some great progress on the social and economic rights. I think the system of grants that was given to the poor during, I think, President Begi's time, to a bold effort to bridge the gap between the haves and the have-nots must have been there. Well, I think at the moment, it's cause for regret that instead of narrowing that gap between the rich and the poor, we have in fact extended it. largely because of policies that have been adopted, the economic policies in the country that we have not done much to narrow the gap between the rich and the poor. And that gap between the rich and the poor in this country is a matter of utter shame to our democracy, even to this day. And I can't imagine anybody being proud of that, but we don't, all the policies that we have, that we are working with, seems to me are set to continue to create that unequal society that we are living with. I could go on and give all sorts of reasons for that. But it may well be the case that the COVID coronavirus pandemic found this nation at its weakest and its most vulnerable in general. But one prays that we will emerge out of this, having learned the lessons of inequality and poverty in the country, and that our economic system should never be the same again. Should never be founded on the power of those who have capital and ignoring the many who are suffering. And so as a society in South Africa, I hope we are learning some lessons. Other forms of divides worry me less. I do think that we've friddled away opportunities to do something about social cohesion in our country. And in many respects, we are today a very racially divided society than I suspect we have been since 1994. Social cohesion, really, coming to think of it, I don't think there's a serious enough effort to build social cohesion in this society at all. The politics of South Africa are most deplorable, and I put the blame personally on the nature of our politics, and that's where I think we are failing. All the instruments that have been put in place, Chapter 9 institutions, very many state institutions. There was a time when those were really hammered by the government to make sure that they don't operate effectively as they should, whether it's NPA, SIU, or whatever else, South African Police Service. We are at a stage now, I think, that we have to rebuild all of those institutions. The Electoral Commission, Chapter 9 institutions, those need to be rebuilt. And it's not going to be an easy job because they were totally destroyed in the recent past. That's all I want to say.
Thank you for that, Barney. We are almost at the end of our time, so I just want to give Leon literally 2 minutes to say a final word or two. We do have some more questions about non-racialism and about F.W. de Klerk's statement earlier this year about apartheid not being a crime against humanity, but we won't have time to go there now. Leon, if you just want to give us a final wrap up from your side, and then I'm going to hand over to Olutubi.
I just want to say thank you so much, Conrad, once again. I think there would not have been this discussion had I not written this book. And it takes a long and it's a very taxing experience to write a book. But the discussion it generates fills me with a lot of joy and a lot of excitement. And if it helps to promote a better understanding among South Africans, it will further delight me. Thank you.
Thank you, Leon. Thank you, Barney. But I'm going to hand over to Dr. Olutubi Akimbadi, who is our postdoctoral research fellow in the research program at the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy, to do the final thanks.
Okay, thank you so very much, Prof. On behalf of CANRAD, I want to especially appreciate Drs. Barney Pityana and Dr. Leon Wessels. Thank you so very much for this, this conversation. From observation, I think it's very thoughtful. I think you've been able to provide us with very useful depth, because you also did allude to the fact that we must understand the past from different lenses if we are going to forge a meaningful pathway into the future. So thank you very, very much for that. On behalf of the CANRAD team, we'll say a big thank you for giving us part of your time today. And also I want to warmly appreciate the director of CANRAD, Alan Zinn. I want to appreciate the head of programs, Professor Christie, and also to Zandile for the efforts in putting together this awesome conversation, and also to everyone that has been part of the program. Thank you very much for coming online to be part of this meaningful and thoughtful conversation. Thank you very much on behalf of CANRAD. I say thank you to everyone for your questions. And also, on a final note, I want to remind us also that tomorrow we're going to have our Living History series. Is going to continue. We started last week, Wednesday. We're going to continue tomorrow by 11 a.m. prompt. So please do join us tomorrow again for another awesome time such as this. Thank you very much on behalf of CANRAD. And I want to say bye for now. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
You can switch on your camera to wave. We just to break through the technological distance a little bit. If anybody wants to switch on and just give a good wave, and yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.